We have got to stop this insanity.
Actually, there's a good segue here, may I?
Absolutely.
Between the legal system and the corporate person, because what happened was, in the Exxon Valdez case, we will make you whole. We counted quality of time with our children. We weren't able to fish with our kids. The native folks counted not being able to teach the young children the subsistence ways because everybody was involved with the cleanup. We took all these claims. Exxon said, we would make you whole. We took all of our hurts to the court. And the court said, you know what? We can't put a dollar figure on a subsistence culture. We can't put a dollar figure on quality family time. So that was called non-economic damages. And that's when a lot of us in Cordova said, wait a second here. How did corporations get so big where they could write the rules and tell us what we lost, what counts and what doesn't count? And I went, you know, I don't know. And people in town went, you're the town philosopher, find out, you know? So I was like, geez. So I was 2 years taking basically courses, reading a lot of books on democracy. I mean, I'm a toxicologist, you know, I sort of missed this whole part of, or I focused on something else, and I was aghast to discover that we had left the third branch of government largely up to lawyers, which is, I'm talking here about the judiciary branch. And back in 1886, they made this, you know, little decision, which actually they didn't even decide it. The judge said, we already agree that corporations are entitled to equal protection under the law, so we are not going to argue it. This issue of corporate personhood, corporations having human rights, the same rights we have, has actually never been argued in a court of law. But at any rate, it's happened. It's now become precedent. And when I kind of looked at this, it didn't make any sense to a non-lawyer that our Constitution 34 times uses the word person, Constitution and Bill of Rights, and it never distinguishes between we, real people, and corporate people. And now here we are with the Supreme Court just sort of saying, well, it just blurs, it just means both of you.
Right.
And that is how we got to Citizen United, and that is how we got into this mess. There has been a steady usurpation of our human rights, an illegitimate taking, I call it, by corporate people through the engine of consolidation, what Thomas Jefferson called the engine of consolidation, the Supreme Court giving our rights to corporations. And now here we are to this day where we've just basically lost the plot.
Well, that and I think democracy. We're going to be going to a break right now and coming back and talking about the Supreme Court decision that Ricky's referring to, where now it's sort of like a Dred Scott decision, only it's in reverse. And now people, like the four of us here, are considered 3/5 of a corporation. And that doesn't really work for May. And what we can do about it. She's been working on it very hard. And we'll be right back. I do. I'm basking. It's a replacement for sunshine right now. Clapping. I'm so glad to be back with our panel here. We were talking a bit about Exxon and the damages there, and part of the reason I brought it up is that A, it's still very painful. It's brought up. It has not been resolved for the people of Alaska, I don't think, for a majority, and especially those affected. But right now we hear a lot of whining on behalf of the oil companies that, you know, if we could just give them the oil, they'd be fine. They don't want to have to close up shop. Yet right now we have, you know, highest amount of employees on the North Slope that we've ever had. We've got record profits. ConocoPhillips, record profits off Alaska. We're only 12% of their investment, and we're second quarter last year, I think, was 55% of their profits and earnings were from their 12% investment here. They're fine. Yet we're seeing Craig Johnson try to roll back ACEs. We're seeing Liesl McGuire doing this as well. They're trying to give $1 billion bailout, to oil companies right now. $1 billion for an oil company that doesn't need it, but Alaskans could use a bailout, certainly in other areas. So part of the reason to talk about Exxon is to also say they're still doing it, this sort of meandering that happens, and what can we possibly do about that? Elstun, what do you think right now when you hear the whining of the, we're going to have to close up shop and go home?
Well, it's absurd, especially considering that ConocoPhillips gets 30% of its revenue from Alaska. I hardly think they're going to walk away from the state. But one of the proposals, House Bill 308 by Craig Johnson, is proposing to give, according to the analysts at the Revenue Department for the state, will give $575 million a year in tax breaks to the oil companies before they count the little benefit that they get for hiring Alaskans, which, when you add that in, will drop their tax rate to 20%, would generate about $750 to $800 million annual benefit in exchange for what Craig Johnson calls 2,500 jobs. Well, 2,500 divided into 750 million comes to roughly, what are we talking here, $300 million or so per job? And I don't want to ever hear a Republican complain about Barack Obama's stimulus package when they want to give $300,000 per job, and it's virtually unauditable, to Alaskans, to these oil companies. Right. It's just, the whole thing is just outrageous.
No, and I think what might be really offensive to you and I, certainly being oil spill plaintiffs, would be that $500 million after 20 years of waiting was the settlement from Exxon. No. Okay, and they got 110 of that, so it was about $390 million that they had to pay Alaskans for the biggest environmental disaster we've ever seen. But we're going to give them over $500 million a year back.
I was listening to Day to Day the other day, and they had a guest on who studies the national economy, and he said that one of the reasons we're non-competitive is because we don't have a VAT tax and apply that to healthcare costs. But in the course of the discussion, he talked about China building a semiconductor plant in China for Intel and creating 10 to 15,000 jobs overnight. $1 billion. Boy, that sounds like a lot of money. That's 2 years of what we want to give to the oil companies. I would rather see us build a chip plant, buy an NFL team, build a coliseum. I don't care, but I don't want to give it to the oil companies.
Right. Well, because it doesn't stay here. What do you think about all of this, Dick?
Well,
you're smiling on occasion.
Well, it's interesting because I've done a lot of work within Oil Patch. I mean, as a consultant inside the organizations. And there's a great deal, as we all know, of vertical integration. I mean, we have companies that supply goods and services to the major oil companies that are dependent through their contracts to hire people and make a profit. And so when Mama says it's time to come inside or to do whatever you've been asked to do, you line up and you don't slap the hand that feeds you. And it's very difficult to, tell the emperor he's wearing no clothes and to push back up. But that's what I think, what a good number of people in Alaska would like to do in the privacy of their home. But because of the, you're supposed to line up and bow, you don't see it enough. And I think we're getting to the point, I think Elstun and Ricky, sometimes we see people out on the front edge that are doing the work for the rest of us. And I think the rest of us need to stand up.
If I may say just one quick response to that. The oil field service providers are the ones who do the work in the field. The oil companies directly don't do any work. They basically broker the product and play money games. It is the oil field service companies that do the work. They could do the work for Big Dipper Oil. And Big Dipper Oil, by the way, you are a shareholder in. How many people here have gotten a dividend from Exxon directly? How many people here have gotten a permanent fund dividend check? Yeah. All right. So who is Alaska's oil company? Is it ConocoPhillips or is it Big Dipper Oil? because that's what is at issue here. And the legislature is the board of directors for Big Dipper Oil. The governor is supposed to be the chief executive officer, and their duty of care is to us. And under Article 8 of the state constitution, they're supposed to deliver maximum benefit. And my message to Greg Johnson is keep doing what you're doing at your peril.